Do not consume this mushroom. This mushroom is an amanita muscaria, which is in Swedish called rödflygsvamp, red fly mushroom, and in English it is known as the Flyagaric or fly amanita. It is identified by its red cap with white dots on it, though there are barely any dots on this example of a mushroom that I picked from this forest here. And it is also identified by its white body underneath, its gills, and this ring and this sac and vulva here beneath it on the beginning of the mushroom fruit. It is a deadly poisonous mushroom, and deaths have occurred from ingesting this mushroom, though due to modern medical treatments, fatal poisonings have become a lot rarer than they were in the past. Though one reason for the increased number of deaths in the past from poisoning regarding this mushroom has to do with the fact that this was a mushroom that was used a lot in the past for several things. It was used as an insecticide and as a drug that introduced hallucinogenic visions and or various mood states, and surprisingly enough was used for food as well. The reason as to why this mushroom is called Flyagaric or fly mushroom, flugsvamp in Swedish, is due to the fact that you crushed this mushroom together with water or milk in a bowl and let it stay out to draw flies to it that would die of poisoning from the mixture. And Carl von Linné, the famous Swedish 18th century botanist, described how crushed Red-Fly-Agaric could be used to kill and repel walleyes by coating the walls with this mixture of crushed Red-Fly-Agaric and a liquid. The poisonous nature of the Red-Fly-Agaric was used as an insecticide in the past, but it was also used as a drug, as I will discuss now, because a common belief is that Viking berserkers used Red-Fly-Agaric to induce enough anger to go berserk. However, there is actually little historical evidence for this, and this view is largely based upon a hypothesis by a single 18th century researcher with the name Samuel Ödman, who proposed this hypothesis. Though I will say that it is not impossible for Red-Fly-Agaric to have been used in this way, as Red-Fly-Agaric, when it's dried and taken in small amounts, can cause hallucinations and extreme mood swings as a drug, and thus cause these kind of like berserker states in a way. Yet it is very unpredictable if you were to use it as a drug in that way, as it's much more likely to cause hallucinations without extreme emotional reactions like that. No, a far more likely substance to have been used by these old Norse berserkers is the seeds of Hyoscyamus niger, known in common English as henbane, black henbane, or stinking nightshade. Containers filled with these seeds have also been found in old Nordic grave sites as well, which at least confirms their use, in a way that we do not have confirmation about the use of the Red-Fly-Agaric. Though if the Red-Fly-Agaric was used for something in the old pre-Christian Nordic context associated with the berserkers, then it is probable that the Red-Fly-Agaric was used in various rituals as a hallucinogenic drug. And the berserkers were associated religiously with Odin. And also the mushroom's hallucinogenic properties might have not been used on the battlefield, but in connecting with the gods, with Odin for example. This is not that unlikely, as other peoples on the Scandinavian peninsula have used the Red-Fly-Agaric due to its hallucinogenic properties in various rituals. For example, some Samic groups, Samic peoples being peoples found in northern Scandinavia that speak Ural Altaic languages rather than Indo-European North Germanic languages have been known to use the Red-Fly-Agaric for its hallucinogenic properties in various rituals and to enter various trances. Some Samic groups used to give their reindeer this mushroom, both to calm them down, to make the reindeer more passive and easier to control, but also to later collect the urine from the reindeer and drink it in order to get hallucinations from the poisons that had been diluted through going through the reindeer, but still were potent enough to give hallucinations in various shamanistic rituals to connect to the spirits. And though this practice is much later than the early Norse people of the Viking Age, it is still possible or even probable that similar practices existed back then. And it is not unlikely that the old Nordic peoples could have discovered the same thing with this mushroom, with its hallucinogenic properties, and used it in their rituals, or taken it from the Samic peoples, or the Samic peoples could have taken it from the old Nordic peoples, or taken it from other peoples and used it in their rituals. As this use is not that strange, as the Red-Fly-Agaric has been used similarly in eastern Siberia and by certain Native American groups too, as the mushroom is present in more or less the entirety of the northern hemisphere. Regardless of its origins, when it comes to its use, the mushroom was still used in Christian times too, among the Nordic peoples in Scandinavia. For example, the Red-Fly-Agaric was used in various Christian mystic rituals to get closer to God. The consumption of parts of these mushrooms was used in various practices such as the year walk, which I've made a video about, by the way. Link is in the description. Check out that video after this video. But the consumption of parts of this mushroom, due to its hallucinogenic properties, was used in a lot of practices associated with Christian mysticism, also outside of the year walk. But it was also used in folk traditions as a drug to cure, among other things, curses and depression, and as a means to get in contact with various spirits and mystical creatures in Swedish folklore. Due to this association, it was also at times heavily associated with witchcraft and magic. Though this mushroom also has a modern history, and it's not just associated with esoteric movements in the past or with the far past. Because during the 60s
and the rise of the trippy hippie movement, peace man,
you saw a rise of the use of this mushroom, as this mushroom became popular among certain groups there as well, due to its use as a drug in order to get various experiences. But due to being so poisonous, a lot of people that hadn't prepared their Red-Fly-Agarics properly actually suffered poisonings, resulting in damaged organs and sometimes even in death. Because remember, this is a deadly mushroom which you should not consume. But unfortunately, even to today, partially prepared versions of the Red-Fly-Agaric are still used to this day by teenagers to get high. Sadly, I know this is the truth, as I've seen it with my own eyes, though I have myself never partaken in consuming this mushroom in that way when I was a teenager. But I've seen others doing it. Another contextual fact to mention regarding the Red-Fly-Agaric and its use as a drug that I think is important to mention is that due to the various considerations of cultural significance, such as the Red-Fly-Agaric having historically been used by various Samic peoples and in various Swedish folk traditions and in various Swedish Christian mythic rituals, it is still a legal drug to use in Sweden and has not been banned. It would also be pretty hard to ban this mushroom, as it is such a common mushroom that you can find in pretty much every forest in Sweden. So you also have the practical matter of the difficulty in keeping a ban on this mushroom, as it would be very easy to get your hands upon this mushroom if you really wanted to. But let me remind you again that this is a very poisonous mushroom, and a Swedish, but by then disposed, king by the name of Eric the 14th in the 16th century was possibly killed by having eaten pea soup poisoned by fly mushroom. And that might have been this mushroom, though it is also possible, and even more probable, that it was the Amanita virosa, the destroying angel, or the Amanita phalloides, called in English the death cap, as those also went under the name flugsvamp in Swedish, and were far more deadly than the common Red-Fly-Agaric. Furthermore, it seems the most likely that Eric was killed by arsenic poisoning due to various studies done on his body. But still, the Red-Fly-Agaric has the potential to kill people and thus could be used as a weapon of poisoning as well. Which might make it surprising to you to know that the Red-Fly-Agaric has also been used as a food source as well for people. And up to the 1950s, it was described in some mushroom books in Swedish as a good tasting mushroom after blanching, pulling off the cap skin and drying through a very involved process that also included the salting of the mushroom. And it is described as having a very good distinctive taste. And if the process was done correctly, its drug properties would more or less be entirely gone from the mushroom. Don't try this though, as it is a potentially deadly mushroom, and I'm not a channel that is an expert channel at preparing these sorts of potentially deadly mushrooms. But it should be remembered that this is a pretty common mushroom, and in the past, before industrialization, there wasn't many varied food sources. Thus, if you could prepare Red-Fly-Agaric in such a way that made it non-dangerous to eat, then it would be a pretty good alternative. A food that you could just take from the local forest and also easily preserve through drying it after you had processed it. Then during the winters you could eat it, when other sources of food were more scarce, similarly to any other dried mushroom. It was consumed a lot during the time around Christmas as well, and I suspect that there is a connection between the use of classical Swedish Christmas decorations in the form of the Red-Fly-Agaric and this use of the Red-Fly-Agaric, this consumption of the Red-Fly-Agaric around the time of Christmas, both as a food source but also in various Christian mystical practices of using half-processed mushrooms in order to use its drug properties. And also, yes, in Sweden we do use decorations that look like the Red-Fly-Agaric and or dried Red-Fly-Agaric as decorations for Christmas, even today. And this was the Red-Fly-Agaric and its cultural and historical significance within Swedish culture. I hope you found it interesting. Please do subscribe, as it would help the channel spread awareness about the humanities.
اشتركوا بالقناة من فضلكم.